The fighters of the 24th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces have repelled the attack of the occupying Russian army paratroopers in the direction of the city of Chasov Yar in eastern Donetsk region. The invaders, who wanted to advance with 25 armored vehicles, including tanks equipped with anti-drone devices, armored personnel carriers, and engineering vehicles, were subjected to drone and artillery strikes. At least 16 combat vehicles were destroyed. The Russian paratroopers, seeing that the attack had failed, tried to take up positions in nearby semi-destroyed houses. As a result of successive drone and artillery strikes, more than 30 servicemen were killed. The surviving invaders were forced to retreat with a small number of armored vehicles.
The Russian army is not yet capable of conducting large-scale combined arms offensives. This is confirmed by the situation on the front because for the first time since 2023, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have launched systematic counterattacks. In particular, Ukrainian troops are conducting counterattacks in the Pokrovsk direction, where several settlements have been liberated, as well as near Peshchanoy. This was stated in an interview with Glavred by military political observer of the Information Resistance Group, Alexander Kovalenko, commenting on the question of who benefits more from a pause in the war, Ukraine or Russia. According to him, Russia is interested in suspending military operations because it is currently in a rather difficult situation since its troops are extremely exhausted. In principle, since the beginning of 2025, systematic counterattacks have been taking place every week. This has never happened before. At the same time, the most combat-ready and serious strike group of Russian troops is concentrated in the Pokrovsky direction, which consists of the groups of troops east, center, and south. The 41st and 2nd Combined Arms Armies are located there. That is a large number of forces and means, but even they cannot hold the territory that they captured and are forced to leave the positions that they recently reached. Not to mention that Russian troops are now moving on donkeys and going into assaults in Ziguli, UAZs, and Nivas, the analyst points out. Kovalenko concludes that Russia desperately needs a pause in the fighting. However, even now, the Russian Foreign Ministry says that Moscow will not agree to a ceasefire or negotiations until it is effectively given back the Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk regions, territories that Russia illegally included in its constitution. According to him, this looks like an ultimatum divorced from reality. But this is the Kremlin's position, even in a difficult situation. Russia continues to put forward unacceptable demands, while having significant problems in the Kursk region. The analyst points out that Moscow will not enter into dialogue until it resolves the Kursk region issue and tries to gain a foothold in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. However, as Kovalenko notes, Russia will not be allowed to do this. It will not be able to restore control over Kherson or seize Zaporizhia, since it simply does not have the necessary forces to do so. That's why Russia now really needs a pause to restore its potential, and then, in 6 months or a year, to start another offensive, another war, but even bloodier and more intense, because they will have much more resources at that time, and at that same time, they want to take something for themselves, without even straining themselves. He summed up.
Russian forces have planned ecocide and intend to blow up all the dams along the Maly-Kalchik River in the Donetsk region. Petro Andriushenko, the head of the Center for Occupation Studies, reported the information. The plan is to blow up all the dams along the Maly-Kalchik River to fill the old Crimea reservoir, which has already significantly dried up. This decision is not only ineffective but also ecologically disastrous. It will lead to a radical shift in the natural balance, turning the adjacent areas of Maly-Kalchik into a desert. The river is not just part of the microclimate, it is the only water source for nourishing plants in this region, writes Andriushenko. According to sources, Russian forces also plan to drain or pump water out of the Pavlopol reservoir. Both decisions are aimed at temporarily solving the water supply problem in Mariupol, but their effectiveness is extremely limited. The first measure will provide water for a maximum of a week, and the second for up to a month. At the same time, these actions will not only fail to address the water shortage in the city but will also inevitably lead to a humanitarian catastrophe in Mariupol and irreversible ecological changes in the region. Given the scale and nature of the impact, these plans can be classified as a continuation of the policy of ecocide, wrote Petro Andriushenko. It should be noted that Russian-controlled forces in Kherson Oblast have deliberately made it harder for civilians to evacuate the flood zone following the Russian destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in June 2023. According to an investigation by the Kiev Independent, the Russian military interfered with the work of locals who were evacuating people from the flooded areas on their own. Their boats were confiscated, while the volunteers were threatened and forced to stop the efforts. In turn, the local rescue services, working under occupation, did not have enough resources for the evacuation, while the occupation authorities deliberately concealed the magnitude of the disaster. As a result of these actions, civilians on the occupied east bank of Kherson Oblast that could have been rescued have died. The evacuation of civilians fell on the shoulders of the locals, who organized and coordinated the rescue themselves, in particular, via a Telegram chat. Yet, Russian soldiers did not allow volunteers to enter all the flooded areas, and confiscated their boats under threat of punishment.